Julius Robert Oppenheimer's life was groomed from the start for becoming a genius, and it showed throughout his life. Oppenheimer was born to an affluent Jewish New York family, and he grew up in a world of moderate luxury on the Upper West Side. He attended the New York School for Ethical Culture, where he gained a lifelong love for art, literature, philosophy, and the classics. Oppenheimer had talents uncomparable to other people's, which he showed while working on one of the most important top-secret projects of the 20th century, the Manhattan Project. J. Robert Oppenheimer was born on April 22, 1904. Oppenheimer's childhood showed no hint of decadence or overindulgence, but was a luxurious life and a very sheltered one. His parents, particularly his mother, saw to it that everything and everyone with whom he came into contact was refined, tasteful, and pleasant. Robert's parents did everything they could to stimulate Robert's intellectual and artistic interests. In the 1930s, Oppenheimer became drawn into left-wing politics. Oppenheimer was awarded a United States National Research Council Fellowship to the California Institute of Technology in September 1927. Oppenheimer also accepted an associate professorship from the University of California in Berkeley. Robert Oppenheimer prospered as an advisor and collaborator to a generation of physicists who admired him for his intellectual virtuosity and broad interests. He worked closely with Nobel Prize-winning experimental physicist Ernest O. Lawrence and his cyclotron pioneers, helping them understand the data that their machines were producing at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. In the late 1930s, Oppenheimer became interested in astrophysics, probably through his friendship with Richard Tolman, an American mathematical physicist, resulting in a series of papers. Oppenheimer's papers were considered difficult to understand, even by the standards of the abstract topics he was an expert in. He was fond of using elegant, if extremely complex, mathematical techniques to demonstrate physical principles, though he was sometimes criticized for making mathematical mistakes, presumably out of haste. In 1941, J. Robert Oppenheimer was brought into the Manhattan Project. His first task was to calculate the critical mass of uranium-235, i.e. the amount of uranium needed to sustain a chain reaction. As director of the Manhattan Project, American physicist Robert Oppenheimer was responsible for collecting, coordinating, and leading the team that developed and detonated the first atomic bomb. He was also one of the principal proponents of using the bomb against an actual military target, a recommendation that ultimately resulted in the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the unconditional surrender of the Japanese in World War II. Oppenheimer drew together a group of the most brilliant and able physicists he could collect. The roster included names like Enrico Fermi, Hans Bethe, Edward Teller, Victor Weisskopf, and Richard Feynman. He soon proved himself to be an inspiring director and an unusually capable coordinator, able to mentally track hundreds of different projects and personnel and to understand concepts as quickly as they were put in front of him. By July of 1945, the team was ready to test its bomb. The test, codenamed Trinity, took place on July 16th. The bomb exploded with a force equivalent of 18,000 tons of TNT. Perhaps the most famous Robert Oppenheimer quote of all time is when, after the Trinity test in Los Alamos, New Mexico, he says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Robert Oppenheimer was brilliant, arrogant, proud, charismatic, and a national hero. Under his leadership during World War II, the United States succeeded in becoming the first nation to harness the power of nuclear energy to create the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, the atomic bomb. Robert Oppenheimer had a very interesting life, including a lot of work as a scientist, which included working on the Manhattan Project, which ultimately produced the first atomic bomb in the world. Robert's childhood assisted him improve and excelling in the topics he studied by making sure his entire childhood was generally isolated from anything unpleasant. Robert Oppenheimer proved to be a very good project manager, leading many people on one of the most important projects of the 20th century. Robert Oppenheimer's scientific contributions to the world created an everlasting legacy on nuclear research. Sadly, Robert Oppenheimer would die of throat cancer on February 18, 1967, at just 62 years of age.